Follow along, Catholic Pilgrims, as we follow French doctor of the Church, St. Francis de Sales, through his book, Introduction to the Devout Life. Tune in as we read through this practical guide for living out the Catholic faith well. Welcome back, Catholic Pilgrims. We have a more in-depth reading lined up for today, and it's going to be on venial sins. Growing up Protestant, I was taught that all sins are equal. A sin is a sin is a sin. While it is true that all sin offends God, we know instinctively that some sins are worse than others. Of course, murder is worse than stealing a candy bar. Stealing a candy bar is not equal in wrongness as the taking of someone's life. And we punish these sins or crimes differently because we understand the vast difference in offense between the two crimes. Justice demands we treat the two differently, and since we are not more just than God, it only makes sense that God treats mortal sins and venial sins differently. That isn't to say that he treats venial sins lightly, they still offend him, but it is to say that they don't carry the same weight. It's good to reflect, though, on our venial sins and work to remove them, as habitual venial sins can lead us to mortal sins, which we absolutely do not want. So, let's open our books to chapter 22 of the first part. Chapter 22. We must also lay aside our disposition towards venial sins. As the light waxes fuller, we see the more plainly in our mirror the stains and specks upon our face. Even so, as the Holy Spirit enlightens our conscience, we perceive more clearly and distinctly the sins, inclinations, and imperfections which hinder us in attaining to true devotion. The same light which discovers to us these tares and weeds also kindles us with the desire to cleanse and purify our hearts from them. You will discover then, my daughter, that besides mortal sins and their affections from which you are now purified, there yet linger in your heart various inclinations and dispositions to venial sin. I do not say that you will discover venial sins, but you will find a disposition and inclination to them, which is a very different thing. For we can never be wholly free from venial sins, at least not for any length of time, but we can be without affection for them. There is a wide difference between a chance falsehood concerning some trivial matter, which is the result of carelessness, and taking pleasure in falsehood or deliberately telling lies. Therefore, I say we must purify the soul from all inclination to venial sins. That is to say, we must never willingly admit or continue in any kind of venial sin whatever. It would indeed be a fearful thing wittingly to burden our conscience with anything so offensive to God as a will to displease him. And venial sin, however slight, does displease him, although not so grievously as to make him condemn and destroy us for it. If therefore venial sin so displeases God, all consent and affection on our part to it is nothing less than a willingness to displease his divine majesty. Can any pious soul not only offend God, but take pleasure in so doing? All such inclinations, my daughter, are directly opposed to devotion, as inclinations to mortal sin are opposed to charity. They enfeeble the spirit, hinder divine consolations, and open the door to temptation, so that, though they do not slay the soul, they wound it grievously. Dying flies, says the wise man, spoil the sweetness of the ointment, by which he means that when the flies only pass over the surface of the ointment and eat as they go, what remains is uninjured. But if they remain in it, they putrefy and spoil it all. So the venial sins of a devout soul which find no resting place do no great injury, but if they are harbored and delighted in, they destroy the sweetness of the ointment, that is, of pure devotion. Spiders do not kill bees, but they spoil and corrupt their honey, covering the combs with their webs, by which if they remain, the bees are hindered in their work. So venial sins do not destroy the soul, but they hinder devotion, and so clog the powers of the soul with bad habits and inclinations that it loses that active charity, which is the life spring of devotion, always supposing that we willingly harbor venial sin in our conscience. Some slight falsehood, some lack of self-control in word or action, in dress, in occupation, in amusement, these will leave no lasting evil if, like spiders' webs, they are banished from our conscience as soon as perceived, just as the bees drive out the intruding spider. But if we permit them to remain, still more if we take any pleasure in them and suffer them to multiply, soon our honey will be lost, and the hive of our conscience will be soiled and damaged. But I ask again, what sincere soul could ever take delight in offending God, rejoice in displeasing him, and persist in willing that which he forbids? When I was in high school, I ran track. And one of the most fun events to run is the 4x100 relay race. It's fast, it's exciting, and it requires great skill to pull it off seamlessly. Sometimes my 4x1 team would run against teams that had just decided to enter that race. They had no real practice or knowledge of how it was run. Like they could run it and they could go fast, but the details were lacking to make the race run smoothly, so they would never win. They had the major part down, the running and the basic handing off of the baton, but they lacked the attention to details. And as a 4x100 runner, it's all about the little things. To get really good, you have to practice over and over the handoff. You don't want any hesitation, no stutter steps, just a flawless transfer from one sprinting runner to the next sprinting runner. And timing is everything. Watch Olympians run this race, and you will see that it is run as smooth as butter. Nothing is clunky. Removing mortal sin from our lives is absolutely necessary, just like being able to sprint a race is absolutely necessary to run a 4x100. To strive for holiness, you have to remove mortal sin first and foremost. To then get really good at sprinting a relay race, you have to work on the little details. To cross the finish line first, you need to perfect and mold your craft. It's the same with holiness. Once you've removed mortal sin from your life, you can't stop there. You have to then turn your attention to the venial sins that creep up. By allowing venial sins to continue in our lives, St. Francis tells us that they will, quote, enfeeble the spirit, hinder divine consolations, and open the door to temptations, so that, though they do not slay the soul, they wound it grievously, unquote. Not practicing the little things in racing might not leave you in last, but it definitely will wound your chances of getting first. And if you are truly serious about being a good sprinter, you will want to do all that you can to win that first place medal. And it's the same with holiness. If you are truly serious about being a saint, you will want to do all that you can to not offend God, and all that you can to purify your soul. Because like St. Francis says, quote, what sincere soul could ever take delight in offending God, rejoice in displeasing him, and persist in willing which he forbids, unquote. We will work our whole earthly lives to remove venial sins and our inclination to commit them. But if we really love God, we will be up to the challenge and ask for his grace to get a little better every day and pay attention to the details. That's all for today, Catholic Pilgrims. I pray you have a very blessed day. And until we meet again, live the faith boldly and travel well.